Welcome to the podcast. MFJJ here in Archery Country in Austin, Texas. Headed down here for a deer hunt and had an extra day or two and thought, why not come to probably the most significant place in the area, the one I've heard the most about that I've never been into, and met Tyler here and walked us through kind of a little bit of the day in the life and a little bit of what the shop looks like and what have you. And his backstory is very interesting and intriguing, so I thought, why not just talk about it and show it a little bit? So how did you get into archery originally, Tyler?
Yeah, man. So hopefully I'm doing this right.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, 6 inches to a foot.
6 inches.
It feels awkwardly uncomfortable from a man's standpoint
it feels a little
to
weird,
do this.
We're gonna go here. Yeah. So I got it's like anybody else. I was a rifle hunter. I didn't grow up hunting, but rifle hunter.
Mm-hmm.
I got into it a bunch and was really eaten up with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that turned into rifle was too easy.
Right.
And I've told this story before, but it's a pretty funny story. When everything changed was I was after a big deer out in the hill country.
Right.
And it was one of those days where Texas was playing football, but I had come to a camera like 2 days before,
Mm-hmm.
and this was like real early, so not cell phone cameras, but just cameras in general. So I'd pulled my card, and I'm like, oh, he's been here the last 2 nights.
Right.
So I was planning on going and hunting him. Long story short, I was in a rifle blind, but it was supposed to be really cold, which really cold by our standards are not what y'all are used to.
Yeah, you guys are freezing to death out here, and I'm like, it's warmer than home right now. What are you talking about?
It's freaking brutal to us. It's not
I get you.
Anyway, it was a freaking brutal day in the hill country, and I had made like a thermos full of like chili, and I had this little portable TV because UT was playing football.
Sure.
So I'm literally like, I have my rifle leaned up, and I'm watching the UT football game at like 4 in the afternoon, and this deer pops in at like 5 o'clock to the feeder, and I'm like, he showed up. So I'm like, well, he's not going anywhere. He's been here for like a couple hours for the time being. So long story short, I wait till there's a commercial break. I put the window down, I bust the deer, and then I'm like, he's not going anywhere. So I'm going to watch the end of the third quarter here, and then we'll go. It's pretty brutal, dude. So
That's awesome.
That was when things mentally changed, and I was like, all right, probably time to get a little more challenging here.
Right.
So, anyway, all that being said, that started it. I really wanted to make it a little harder, which my natural progression was go buy like a Marlin 30-30, go buy a go do it to it with that. Did the lights turn off? They're on a thing. It's all right.
No worries. We're all right.
Yeah. So, long story short, I bought a Marlin 30-30 iron sights. I started hunting in the brush that way, and then the natural progression was archery next. And man, I never looked back. That was 97, 98.
97, 98. So
yeah, man.
When did you take the path into taxidermy?
So there's a real crazy story about that.
Every story you got's relatively crazy, so it should be good.
Kind of crazy.
Haven't heard this one yet.
So, make a long story short, I graduated from high school. Mm-hmm. Not the brightest crayon in the box. I set out to not go to college. I was like, dude, college is not for this guy. I can go I'm smarter than everybody else. I know everything there is to know in the world. So
the story sounds very familiar.
It
Go ahead.
resonates with a lot of people. So in essence, what I did was I started a AC filter company here in Austin.
All right.
I was out of high school for about a year, worked for an air conditioning company, worked whatever. Everybody was like, get used to saying you want fries with that, because they were all like, this guy's not going to college and whatever.
Sure.
So I noticed at the filter company, at the air conditioning company I was working at, that everybody wanted their filters done because the company had sold them a contract to do preventative maintenance on their equipment.
Sure.
Well, no one was doing it because they were like, man, we're doing a $4,000 install over here. We're not going to go change out $10 worth of filters or whatever.
Right.
So I started a filter company, and I went into it just being like, hey, I'm just going to do filters only. I'm not going to sell you a maintenance plan. I'm not going to try and talk you into a bigger compressor or more anything. I'm just going to do filters
Just
only.
come in and change your air filters.
That's it, man. And in Texas,
That's a good idea.
That's a huge deal because air conditioners run 10 months out of the year.
Oh, sure.
So it's a
Yeah.
necessity thing, and people would rather eat ramen noodles for a month and not have a steak than sleep in an 82-degree house in the middle of summer.
I wouldn't doubt it. It does get quite hot down here. I will
It gets
attest to
brutal.
that.
So anyway, that being said, I started that filter company. Well, the filter company would die off in the wintertime. It would
Right.
totally just go dormant. Nothing was going on.
Yeah.
I was huge into hunting. All I wanted to do was hunt, man. It was my whole everything, dude. All I wanted to do was go try and kill deer and pigs and get notches on my guns and bows and all that. So I started guiding with a guy who was a taxidermist in South Texas. That guy was a taxidermist. I would go in. We would take the hunters out in the morning. I would go do taxidermy with him in the afternoon because we were just bopping around waiting till the evening hunt. And then I would help skin and do all that stuff. I did that for 5 years, or 6 years actually, before I moved on. And what ended up happening was I was doing the taxidermy stuff with him. A buddy of mine actually bought Archery Country in, I still don't know the actual year. I probably should look this up before I start spouting numbers.
You're fine.
05, 06.
Somebody on the internet will find it for us. It's fine.
Correct. 05, 06. Somewhere in there was when my buddies bought the archery shop. It was a Steiner family out of Austin here. So I did that. They bought the archery shop. They had kind of said, well, dude, if you're doing taxidermy on the side, why wouldn't you just put a business in here? We already have hunters coming here and all that stuff.
Right.
It's funny because I talked to a bunch of area taxidermists, and not to get, we can bleep this out if we need to, but every single person that I talked to was like, Austin's full of hippies and queers, man. They were like, you're never going to do any taxidermy work. And I was like, fair enough, man. But I started it anyway. So I attached to Archery Country in 05, 06, somewhere back there.
Sure.
And it just kind of progressed that way. And that's how this ended up happening. I had the filter company the whole time, and they benefited each other. That business was hammered in the summertime.
Perfect.
Taxidermy was hammered in the wintertime.
Yep.
And then I got into buying and selling goats and cattle, and I had a whole deal
Yeah.
with
Tell that whole
stuff.
story.
Oh, dude, it's so wild, man. So a good buddy of mine, early 2000s.
You're a goat peddler.
I was, man. Go goatdealer.com, dude.
Do you still own that domain?
I wish I did.
Oh,
but it's funny
God,
because
that
I got
should
a
be so
buddy
good.
that actually bought it. He's like, I swear they're going to make a movie on this one day.
Oh, that's hilarious.
There were some crazy adventures with goat dealing. But anyway, all that being said,
your customer base had to be quite intriguing.
it was one for the it was special. It was, you had high end ranchers to real super redneck dudes.
Right.
Man. But anyway, long story short, I did the goat stuff. That was just like buying and selling and trading and like horse trading. I was one of those guys that I didn't come from anything. I don't come from money. I kind of was like anything to make a buck, as long as I don't have to go to college and sit in the class and pretend like I'm smarter than everybody. Whatever.
We call those entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
sir.
for sure. Yeah, that was an entrepreneur from way back, and I put an asterisk beside that because I was dumb as a box of rocks when I first started. Now, looking back, I'm like, what an idiot, dude. Some of this stuff I just lucked into or whatever. But long story short, I was doing those three things. Well, the Steiner family in 2016 was looking to get out of Austin. They were ready to kind of move on. And that's when this was kind of offered to me. And they were basically like, it needs new blood. It's ready for a little facelift. Like, it just needed some fresh stuff.
And you started the taxidermy what year again? 2006?
So that was 05, 06.
So 10 years of taxidermy, right next to an archery shop.
Yep.
Right.
And that was hammered. And I got super lucky because there was some stuff that happened. So the Steiners are a really well-to-do family in Austin, Texas. The Steiners, like year one, were like, hey, dude, we're going to help you. We'll get you some business. We'll bring you some people. Well, like the first year, they knew the governor of the state of Texas. So Rick Perry brings me a deer. Nolan Ryan brings me a deer. And I'm like, I'm new at this. Like, I shouldn't even be doing these on
you
my
should
own.
not
like,
be giving this to
why
me.
are
I
you
don't know
doing
what I'm doing.
I'm like calling guys who really know, and I'm like, how would you do these eyeballs? Because I think I know what I'm doing, but this is for Rick Perry's. Anyway, they helped me immensely, like, grow in. And
Nice.
to this day, I will still give the Steiners most of the credit for a lot of my success. A lot of the people I've met along the way, I still subscribe to it's not what you know, it's who you know, and all that stuff. And
I agree 1,000%.
Yeah, that propelled me a lot more than most. So I was super fortunate to have that kind of play out that way, introduce me to those people, and those people helped pave it in directions I never would have seen possible, because they were just like, hey, I got 10 buddies that, man, you did a great job on this deer. I'm going to send them all your way. So I never really advertised. I never really went out and beat the streets looking for work. I just had it. We were here at the archery shop. There's hunters coming and going, and it kind of fell into place. So it was cool. And that's the whole story. The goat stuff, we did a ton of that on the side. It ended up being
the Goat Hustler. That's so good.
GoatDealer.com. Just looking back at
Yeah.
the name, I'm like, what were we doing, dude? We like my buddy named it GoatDealer.com, and I remember our very first deal was just this giant cluster out on a highway. Like, we left a trap door on the trailer open, and goats are just bailing off on a highway. We had to shut the highway down, and
Oh my gosh.
it was real bad. But all that being said, you live and learn, and to me, I was living the high life because, like I said, I don't come from anything. We weren't poor by any means. I had good clothes. I had food. We had a house. We had all that stuff. But there was never a lump sum of money that was given to me. There was never anything like that. To me, I would do a goat deal, and we would sell a semi-load of goats to somebody up in upstate New York or something like that. Well, a semi-load of goats would profit us about $4,000, and we would split it. We'd each get $2,000.
Sure.
So to 23, 24, 25-year-old Tyler,
that's a lot.
You give me $2,000, and I'm doing that 2 or 3 times a month, but I'm still doing my taxidermy money, and I'm still making money from my filter business. I was like, I mean, there's no one as rich as me in Texas. I'm the freaking king of Texas, dude. I'm freaking stud over here. So,
right.
Anyway, so there was that.
Where did one acquire all the goats from to deal?
So it was funny.
This is interesting,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
so it was funny because all we were resellers. So in 2007, I think it was 2007, either 6 or 7, we were the largest distributors of goats in the nation. And we never actually owned a goat. There was a guy out in West Texas named Terry Hudson that had a big ranch, and he owned a bunch of land, and he would buy all the goats that would come through that sale barn in San Angelo, Texas. And what ended up happening was he would buy them and then would sort them by like color or age or something like that, and say, hey, I got 400 goats. Well, we would come out, snap pictures of them, put them on AOL, we'd listen to the dial-up tone and all that stuff, and then you'd have a guy call and be like, man, I've been thinking about getting into this. They run with cattle. They don't compete for the same food source, so sweet. I want to buy a semi-load of goats. It's 400 goats. And so we were like, cool, we got you, man. We got them right here. They're pregnancy tested. They're all that. We were literally middlemen. And so I remember one of the first times we did it, hopefully Terry Hudson doesn't listen to this. He's not in archery. I remember Terry Hudson being like, yeah, I got these 2 stupid kids out of Austin that are buying all of my goats, and they're just having semis pull up and load them and send them out and all that stuff. And he's thinking, these idiots, they're buying them from me for $100 a piece, and he's buying them for $50 to $60 a piece.
Right.
Well, we had them sold for $130 to $150 per goat.
Right.
Online. And we weren't doing anything. We were just calling Terry and being like, hey, there's going to be a semi roll in at 4 o'clock. Load those goats. He knows where to go. We've already paid him. We'll wire you the money to your account. And that was that. So we never actually owned a goat. We were brokers. And subsequently how the business fell apart was sale barns caught on to that. So sale barns were like, well, if these 2 idiots can do it, we can put a buyer there at the barn. So they would have a buyer. So now what happened was 07, 08, somewhere in there, if you were a farmer in New York and you wanted goats, you didn't have to go scour the internet looking for someone that sold goats. You could call San Angelo Sale Barn and say, hey, I'm looking for 150 bred nanny goats with whatever. And they would have a buyer buy them for you, and they would tell you, hey, here's the commission fee, here's what we want to make on it, and they'll be on a truck heading your way on Tuesday or whatever. So
Oh boy,
we got cut out. We knew it was inevitable.
So you got your taxidermy shop running and doing crazy things,
Yep.
and you decide I'm going to buy the archery shop these guys want to get rid of.
Yeah. So
Having never done anything related to that whatsoever.
nothing remotely, no retail, no nothing. Man.
But that's the entrepreneur mindset, right? You're gonna.
I call it. I was
you feel
just
confident and you can
dumb
do it.
enough to think that I can tackle this and just no sweat. I got this.
Right.
No, what I'll tell you, what happened was at that time, Austin was becoming kind of a boom town. It's been a boom town for a long time, but it was so hard to drive around this town that I finally got to the point where I was like, man, I'm tired of just driving all around Austin all day. So I was already kind of looking for the next something I could get into or something like that, which ended up being Sid offering me the archery shop. And that turned into I sold my filter company to buy the archery shop, to buy into that. So I didn't have a ton of money, but when I got into the archery shop, Sid had offered it to me. I had kind of played around with just buying it and trying to do it. They were kind of willing to help me on the money part of it and all that. And it ended up turning into me being afraid, the entrepreneur part of it. I'm a risk taker until I'm like, oh man, this is a lot. This is a move. This is a lot bigger than what I'm used to. So with that being said, what I ended up doing was I ended up taking partners. A good buddy of mine was a guy named Brendan Hansen, is one of my best friends here in Austin. Brendan and me were bow hunting. We had kind of started our journey together. He was actually a swimmer at UT, stud swimmer at UT.
Yep.
Like has gold medals. I think he has 6 from 3 Olympics or something. I mean,
he was the biggest athlete in the room with that
he was the
discussion from
biggest
last night.
athlete in the room. Heck, yeah. For sure. So Brendan, I called him and I was like, hey, dude, you want to make bad decisions together? Because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but you don't either. But we're smart guys. We can figure this out. To which he was like, heck yeah, dude, I'm all in. And that turned into, well, what are we going to do if a rainy day comes and we don't have money? We don't know the lawyer part of this. Like, there was a lot of stuff that we were like, dude, where, what's the next move? Where do we go from here? Any of that stuff. So long story short, I kind of pitched. There's another guy named Alan McGraw who was the mayor of a little town called Round Rock up north of here, huge bow hunter. And I was like, what if we brought Alan in as a really smart businessman, number one. He's a lawyer, number two. He's got money, so if we get ourselves in a pickle, we can fall back on that a little bit.
Sure.
That was met with, yeah, dude, we should ask Alan. So I went to Alan. It was funny because Alan was leaving. I can't remember what it was, but I'll try not to screw this up. Alan was leaving for a hunt in like Tajikistan or so, one of the stands.
That sounds right.
Somewhere, yeah.
That sounds right. I've heard that one before.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
One of the stands is probably accurate
I'll
enough,
go with a stand. So he was doing that. Well, he was leaving the next morning. Well, he's the mayor of Round Rock at the time, so he's in like a crazy city council meeting. And so I text him, and I'm like, hey, Alan, I need to talk to you. Holler at me when you get a chance. And that's followed up with, cool, I'm in a meeting. I fly out at 4 a.m. for wherever. How about I'll call you on, 2 weeks from now? And I'm like, nah, it doesn't work. You got to call me tonight. And Alan, if he tells the story, is like, is there a taxidermy emergency?
Yeah.
Like, there is no such thing. Like, what are you talking? So anyway, Alan calls me later that night, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and I'm like, hey, you want to buy the archery shop with me and Brendan? And he was like, what? He had no idea. It was a left field deal. And I was like, well, I kind of need to know before you do this trip, because one way or another, I'm trying to make this deal happen here pretty quick.
Right.
To which Alan bought in and came in on the deal. The good thing about him was he brought like a sense of calm to it, because I was, like I said, younger and not the brightest crayon in the box, and I was like, we can do this, we're gonna make millions, it'll be cool, we're whatever. And he was the voice of reason that was like, no, let's start here, let's work our way there. Just a voice of reason in a lot of stuff. So really good partner to have. we all kind of approached this from the standpoint of this is our hobby, and if we can make money doing our hobby and having a little fun doing it, then why not have fun doing that? So
Sure.
at the time, there was a manager of the shop that had run it for 15 years or so, and he had run this thing the way he wanted to run it for a really long time, and it was just kind of his way or the highway. And it was funny because looking back, we all had identical setups in Austin for probably 15 years. You would come in here and he'd be like, well, you want a Matthews and you want a QAD and you want this Excel site.
Right.
And if you looked at anything else, they were like, I mean, if you want that junk on your bow, I guess you can put that on there. So it was just the way he had run it for millenniums.
Sure.
No one really knew any difference.
He found something that he was comfortable
Yeah.
with and wanted
He
to force
knew-
everyone into
He
it.
knew the margins were right. He knew everything, so he
Sure.
knew what he had. So,
Sure.
long story short, Lucky, his name was Mike Lucky. He ran it for the first year and a half that we had it, and then we all decided it needed fresh blood, kind of like what the original owner was kind of wanting to do and all that. And
Sure.
so we all consciously were like, hey man, maybe it's time for a change here. And initially we were going to hire somebody else. I wasn't going to step into this role per se of being a manager and stuff like that. My real goal was to try and get to a point where it would kind of run itself and I could step next door and do taxidermy, and then I could just
Yeah.
kind of check in every once in a while and do
Sure.
whatever, do stuff like that.
Keep your
So-
focus on what you were
Yeah.
intending to do to begin with,
No
right?
doubt. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Focus on that stuff. So, long story short, we did that for a while. Could not find anybody. Turns out it's way harder to find. You know this better
God,
than anybody.
yeah.
So hard to
Terrible.
find good people in the archery industry. And people that kind of match what you're trying to do. That
Right.
was my hardest thing was I wanted the unicorn. I wanted the guy that felt as passionately as I did about it and had the drive and all of that stuff. And you don't find that guy for $30 an hour and $25 an hour.
No, that's
and all
difficult.
that
That's
stuff. So
difficult,
it's
right?
tough. So long story short, I kind of stepped into the role of manager here, and I never stepped in to really like tech or do any of that stuff. I stepped in to be like, man, come in. I'm going to be the face of it. I want to be the friendly guy that greets you when you walk in the door, and then I'm going to hook you up with one of the best techs because I've vetted all of my guys. They're super legit and all that.
Right.
All of our guys that work for us were taught by somebody who was really, really legit. Like I said, I told you earlier, like Tommy Gomez was a part of this shop. He's a designer at, I think he's an engineer at Elite. I know he works for Elite, but he's
Yeah.
designing bows and stuff like that. Tommy had originally showed a lot of my guys how he built strings, how he tied in this. He shot for Matthews professionally for a lot of years. So Tommy showed these guys a lot. I mean, people were coming from far and wide because they were like, well, I want those guys at least working on my bow because this other shop's had it 4 times and they can't figure out why it's flying all crazy.
Sure.
And then turns out we would spine up a hair and then, we'd go from a 340 to a 300 and then tell them
Magically
let's
fixed it.
do this real quick. And they were like, holy crap, it worked. So there's that. So
Yeah.
anyway, we did that, and my point to all that is I had originally come in and said I don't really want to tech, and to this day I'm not the guy you want building your bow. I've had people come in
Right.
and they're like, I want you doing my bow, and I'm like, you really don't. There's a 17-year-old in here that you'd probably rather have him do it than me because I know just enough to make me dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm really good at dealing with people. I'm really good at managing these guys. I should say I'm good at ordering and doing that stuff. Not so much, but I'll tell you that on the podcast to make me sound like I'm really smart here. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, it's one of those deals, man. I leaned real heavily on I can be the face of it, and I'll just pay these techs. I'll make sure I got really, really good guys back there behind the counter. And like I was telling you last night at dinner, man, like there's a guy named Tank, there's a guy named Chase, there's a guy named Jordan, Andy, Tommy. I would put those guys up against almost any of the techs in the nation, and not that I think we're a unicorn crew. I know the reps that they're getting. I know how many bows they're building out, and I know how many people we're making happy, and how many people are coming from far and wide for this, because we get all the time people that are like, there's nothing good in Dallas. I'm driving from Dallas because that. And I'm like, that's crazy, because you're passing 4 stores in Dallas, and then you're going through Waco, and you're going through Temple, and you're passing other
stores along the
stores
way
to come here. It's crazy. But that's the reputation we've built, and that's what we've tried to do. So I don't say that braggadociously. I say that as it's working. Like, it's what we've tried to do. It's the whole thing we tried to do with this deal, is just make sure that these guys who like I said, I'd put money on any of these guys in any kind of thing, and man, let them do what they do behind the counter.
Sure.
And let the rest kind of fall where it does. So,
well, that's an awesome direction that you've gone.
Yeah.
And being the face, it's hard to be the head tech and the face at the same time, right? So it's
I'm sure you
consuming.
Deal with that a little bit.
Yeah, I had to let go of it. I used to like work on every bow, and was the person that like, don't ever let anybody touch my bow but him.
For sure.
And you can only do that so much.
Yeah, true.
You have to be able to put people underneath you that are capable and functional, and then trust them to do their job, and then pay them. And that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Because this is a very labor intensive industry. Really is. That's part of why you run into that, is the reality of it, is why somebody's going by 6 shops to get to you. Is because those 6 shops won't pay somebody to stay.
Sure.
Because they don't think they're making enough money.
Yeah.
You compare this to almost any other industry, it's way more labor intensive for a similar margin.
Yeah.
Which means you got a lot more overhead, and there's smaller margin to your success in the long run.
Yep.
So hats off to you to realizing how important that is, and keeping your people long term. That's a huge part of your success, I'm sure.
Huge. Yeah. And it's also you can get into I'm trying to think of the right way to word this. I had gotten into for a little while there where I was like, we're just the best, and that's it. And I would bounce out a lot and just be next door all day and stuff like that. I still do that from time to time. But you start realizing, like, there's people that come in just to talk to you and see your smiling face and do all of that stuff. And I started realizing, like, it's not humanly possible to be here all the time. So these guys started all making personalities. I've got huge personalities. You'll meet them tomorrow.
Which is good.
You're going to meet a 6'8" guy that's a giant, and he's one of my better techs, dude. The guy is a stud. He's forgotten more. I mean, Tank's awesome at it. And now there's a whole crew of people that are like, I just go to Archery Country to see Tank. They don't know who I am or who Jordan is or who any of my other guys. They're like, no, that's my guy. Which I love. That's what I want. I build relationships, build it. It's not all about me. It's not all about whatever. It's about kind of Archery Country and in general.
That's a step that most shop owners won't get past.
They won't.
They're a little too concerned to not have it be them.
Yeah, and the other part is what I've noticed is a lot of these shop owners started out. We get this a lot. This is the main story we hear. So heed this, other archery shops. That there's one guy that really knows what he's doing.
Yep.
And then there's some high school kids that don't know anything, and they don't want that.
Yeah.
And then it falls back on, if that guy's in a bad mood or he just doesn't want to work on it that day, he's like, well, Tim here will get you taken care of. And they're like, I don't want that.
Right.
And I get that, because we've had people that bring us bows and they live in other towns, and they're like, I'm going on a $50,000 sheep hunt.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that kid is the best tech that there ever was, but I still don't trust the
Don't
17-year-old kid.
Don't get real warm and fuzzy about it.
I know that you guys.
I know, because I was that 17-year-old kid once. That really knew what he was doing, and good luck convincing an adult, like somebody that's spending a lot of money on this, to believe that.
For sure.
That's something that's developed over time.
No,
period.
For sure. Yeah, and you can call it sexist, whatever you want to call it, but there's something to it.
It's ageist.
It's ageist, sexist. I mean, we get it sexist all the time. There's a shop south of town that has a girl tech. She's legit, man. They're good. But they're just like, I don't know, man. I don't know that I trust a 20-year-old girl to do this. And like I said, I paid $100,000 to go to the stands and shoot the ibex and the whatever. So long story short, I don't try and I never try and belittle other shops. We try and help whenever we can. My main deal is I want you, when you come in here, to feel comfortable, number one, and number two, I want you to know that when you walk out, you're like, man, I got premium service. I have full confidence in my setup. I know what is going to happen here when I walk out of here. I'm not like, dang, I hope this D-loop doesn't cut loose when I shoot my third arrow or whatever.
Sure. Well, your customer definitely has to leave with confidence in his equipment. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but having an actual good result while you're still here, which you have everything you need to do that,
for sure,
right, is a huge deal. And I'm sure they all get put through the same ringer in that one.
They do. Yep. Yeah. Nope, they do. And it's huge, man. It's one of those deals where it will move mountains, because now we have people that are like, they'll call or they'll email and they'll say, hey, are y'all open on Saturday? Is 3 hours enough time to set up a bow? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why are you calling to ask that? Just come in or whatever. And they're like, well, I'm driving from Dallas, but 2 weeks ago y'all set my buddy up. I've been to the Shields up here a couple times. I don't know. I think I'd rather deal with y'all. And I'm like, yeah, cool. We'll take you. They're probably just as capable too, but I don't know. Come on, man. I'm not going to turn away the business.
Yeah.
And they make the trip.
Similar stories for sure. We got it so much that we, and I don't know if you've done this yet or not. It would probably be wise if you don't. We set up a calendar and make schedules for people to come in and book them out X amount of time. So, and so they're not overloaded, and you don't have like 9 people walk in at the same time to try to have the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
That's my biggest problem, is that we do scheduling a little bit, but for the most part, I'm just like, come in. The hardest part for us is like, I need, and you can probably rationalize with this, but like, I need 20 million times the range space that I actually have.
Sure.
On weekends, I could hammer this place with people wanting to shoot bows and arrows. The problem is, if there's a party back there of 10 dudes that are on a bachelor party and they just want to shoot arrows before they go eat barbecue, well, you want to take care of those guys, but you also have a guy that just paid $4,000 for a RX-9 with a Garmin on it, and he wants to dial it in, and you're telling him, sorry, I don't have room for you back there. So it doesn't work. So you have to like be kind of, that's why we went to scheduling a little bit on some of this stuff, is I'm like, dude, these guys that come in and pay this good money for this stuff, it's really hard to tell them no or whatever. So.
Yeah, it's hard to balance, right?
It is.
And that's the biggest part of it. But you have an adequately sized shop here, just being honest. But it's probably about as small as you can get away with doing the job that you're doing, which don't get it twisted. He's doing an amazing job. His face-to-face revenue exceeds mine. Like, he's doing really good business for the space that you're operating in, but you're bursting at the seams, and it's probably time to get a little bigger.
It's definitely time.
But that's scary, right? That's phenomenally scary.
And I know we've talked about this, but I know what real estate goes for in Austin. I mean, everywhere in the nation, number one, but Austin, Texas, specifically on highways and stuff. Oh, dude, it's crazy.
If only you bought it 10 years prior on that part,
no,
right?
for sure.
It's
dumb as a box
deal.
of rocks. Like I said, I was out spending money on boats and fishing down at the coast and doing all this stuff when I could have been socking it away to do something substantial. But
so from when you originally bought the archery shop, or let's rephrase that, from when you started being the guy running it,
sure,
till now, what's your growth been like?
It's doubled. It's almost more than doubled. When we first bought it, it was doing $1 million. It was right around in there, and we've doubled that exceedingly a little bit. The reality was, a lot of it was just making sure people were comfortable coming in, and getting past the like gun counter culture, which the gun counter culture to me was, you walk in, there's a crotchety old guy back there.
Yeah.
He looks up at you and he's like, "What do you need, man?" And you're afraid to say like, "Hey, are gas strings good or bad?" And then him be like,
opinionated as all hell.
I mean, so there was that, and I was like, we can't do that. That we got to be the anti that. We got to be overly friendly, and we got to be overly like, just take people where they're at. Not everybody knows what we know. So if they got what they think is the stupidest question ever about a galaxy recurve, we're like, Yeah, no dumb questions, dude. Let's go check it out. I'll show you.
But that's the beauty of your path, right? Like you didn't come into owning an archery shop of I'm going to own an archery shop and I'm the greatest archery guy ever,
no
et
doubt.
cetera, and pound your chest.
Yep.
You came at it from I don't know a ton about this and I'm trying to
Yep.
learn, and I just happen to be an owner. So you took the right path
For sure.
for the consumer, and that's the biggest hang up I ever see with archery shops in general is a lot of the customers are afraid.
They are.
They don't want to feel stupid or dumb.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening out there that are in that place, don't be afraid of that. First of all,
Yeah.
one, if it's a good archery shop, they're going to be gentle with you, and they're going to take care of you, and they're going to try to educate you, which any wise archery shop should be doing that now.
For sure.
And it's a very different thing than 10, 15 years ago, to be honest. But
For sure.
you're going to get way better knowledge going into a pro shop than you ever would a Shields or a chain store or anything like that. So don't be intimidated by it. It's very easy to be, but just be honest and upfront with yourself. Like, look, I don't know. When I get into something that I don't know anything about and it's from a store, the first thing I'll do is, hey, treat me like I'm dumb and I don't know anything because I don't want to miss something that I don't understand.
Yeah.
And be a little humble on it, and you're going to learn so much more from that experience. So I can't emphasize it enough, customer base out there. Go to your local pro shop.
True.
And learn something, because there's a lot of knowledge to be given there, and knowledge is free, people. You just have to want to learn.
That is true. You just got to ask. Yeah, and another thing along these same lines that we did that I never thought of, but it kind of goes back to my statement about doing taxidermy in this town.
Yeah.
One thing I found was I had so many people. So my kids are in school around here. They go to an elementary school in the neighborhood. We live right here in Central Austin. A ton of the parents that we were talking to were like, well, I saw the deer skulls on the building and I just assumed it was hunters only. And so they've never stepped through the door, not knowing that we have a whole section of like recurves and fun
Target archery
like
and
target
fun
archery,
stuff.
like all the other stuff. I'm like, you don't have to shoot deer and do all that stuff. And that was one of the things we changed to this logo when we did the original logo, was that deer stuff like that. And I was like, that's running people off, and that's crazy, but I don't think like everybody else. And I've heard it from enough parents in the neighborhood now that I'm like, that's viable. Like they just assume it's all a bunch of big dumb hunters and they're city folks and they don't know, and it's going to be embarrassing and there's nothing there for them.
Right.
Well, when you flip the script and they come in and they're like, dude, we had a blast. We rented a recurve. We all shot for an hour. It cost us $25, and then we went and had a burger down the road. They're like, what a fun afternoon. They were like, I had no idea we could walk in and do that. And it goes back to what you're saying, trying to take away as much of the intimidation factor as you can. And that's one thing I learned, and I will learn going forward, is, when we move to hopefully something bigger and better and all that stuff, I will get rid of a lot of the skulls and stuff like that on the outside of the building and all that, because it's intimidating. People assume that it's big dumb rednecks driving dually diesels and blowing black smoke and doing all this stuff, and it couldn't be further from the truth. But if you're not educated on it and you don't know, then you don't know. You just stay away from it.
Well, and that's the reality of the common, what's the right way to put this? The common expectation from people that don't hunt.
Sure.
Right? Is they think big dumb redneck. I mean, well, you look at what Hollywood portrays it as, right? And that's the example that they have.
Yep.
So the funny part about that, if you put yourself in a position where people just want to walk in and try it, and maybe they walk in and go, oh, there's some animals in here or whatnot, that kind of thing. But you get them into it, and it is amazing how often that person goes farther down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
No different than, like the Joe Rogan standpoint of, I'm either going to be a vegetarian or I'm going to hunt because I don't like the system.
Yep.
Right? They might be on that path and not know it yet. And if they get experienced into something that is really enjoyable and they have a lot of fun at it, maybe have a little success at it, then the questions start.
Yeah.
And you can take somebody that is completely anti and get them to realize that, hey, this is a healthier, more organic, more natural way for you to to live. I get it if you're never going to eat meat and that's your mindset, but if you eat meat and you think ill of people that hunt, you're an idiot.
Yeah,
like
for
you're not seeing the reality.
And I'll tell you from our standpoint, what I've seen here, I can only speak for my experiences here, but I'll tell you right now, I have vegans that come in and shoot. I have trans people. We have every possible scenario that can play out in the world. They've been through these doors. I promise you they have, dude. You'll get a little taste of it tomorrow. But they come in, if you just don't judge right out of the chute and you say, like, man, you here to shoot some bows? Cool, man, let's get you set up and go on the range. They leave and tell their friends, and it ends up being this huge thing. We have it's crazy. If you were to come in on a Saturday and see the people that roll through that just come rent bows and come hang out on that range, you would be like, dude, what planet are we on right now? I don't even know where we are. Cause it's not the hunter guys. The hunter guys know the range is busy, so they stay away from it. And it's all people renting bows and having fun and doing all that stuff. And in a way, that's a feather in my hat because I'm like, well, I broke down some walls here. I at least made it to where they walk through the door and they're not so intimidated that they're just like whatever. And it's funny because I had lunch, and I was a fly on the wall with this lunch, but with Bill Thompson, Spartan Forge guy, and Donnie Vincent. And Donnie Vincent, in essence, was saying the first time he went to an archery shop, he spent 2 hours or 3 hours. He spent something like that. I'm trying not to screw up his story here, but just out in the parking lot, kind of trying to get up the courage to go in there to ask the questions about getting into bow hunting.
Right.
He was like, I was so intimidated by it because I had heard stories of all of these master hunters that work there, and they're all studs. They kill deer every year. They know the woods around there like the back of their hand. And he was like, so if I come in and say, like, I don't know, maybe I can't draw a 40-pound bow. Are you going to call me a girl and make fun of me for that or whatever? Right. He was like, dude, I didn't know where to start with that. So he was like, that kept me out of him. And I was like, once again, it goes back to the same thing that I was talking about before, is I was trying to double down on I don't want that. We got to be the anti-gun culture, gun counter culture thing. Like, I want you to come in and ask questions, even if you think it's the dumbest question that's ever been. I want you to leave being like, man, what a cool bunch of guys. I didn't even know I could get along with a hunter like that, but man, that was a pretty cool group of guys in there, and I had fun shooting a bow. If you leave with that, then perfect, man. We've done our job.
Yeah,
it's cool. So.
Well, and the beauty of the group that we're in, right, is I've never found – there's a reason I've stayed in it as long as I have, because I've had plenty of other opportunities to get out and do something that would, probably make me more money in the long run or give me a better future. But I love this community of people. Yeah. They're some of the nicest, most giving, most caring people that I've ever found in life.
They are.
Right?
Yeah,
and if only the people that think all this negative stuff of that would get an opportunity to experience it. Yep. And that's really a portion of what you're providing. You're providing an olive branch between those two communities to realize that, hey, these are really good people, and they're not what you think. Yeah. And then once you get past that, then it's like, well, wait a minute. So why are they doing what they're doing then? Yeah. If I think this horrible negativity around it, right? For sure. And I love seeing stuff like what you're doing to create that, because it's our future. Yeah. It is our future. And for shops that are listening, if you're not trying to do that, you're denying your future. For sure you are. Because you need to grow this community. And at the end of the day, the people that are going to grow long term from it are going to really pay attention to that and focus on that like you have, and you've done a great job of it. I have to applaud you for that. No, and I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think some of it, at least in my opinion, is it's cool that there are guys like Rogan's out there and stuff like that, because they're the guys really and truly that are like bridging a gap. Like people. Well, he's the example of what we're looking for, right? I mean, people basically see him as a guy who was fairly liberal. Especially if you're from around here, they were like, he's liberal, whatever. Another Californian moving into our state. But the reality is he's not. He's a bunch of stuff. But at the end of the day, when people are talking about him, they're like, it's cool because he's just going down this like organic path for his meat, and he knows where it's coming from. There's not a disconnect there. He's not necessarily going to the grocery store every night to buy his ribeye or whatever. He's mixing it up or whatever. And I think it opened the eyes to a lot of people, because we get tons of people who we had literally a vegan in here that hadn't eaten meat in 3 years,
And she was like, I've heard so much about this elk meat. We were talking earlier, I sell Force of Nature meat here.
Right.
And they were just like, I kind of want to dip my toes back in, but I'm starting off super duper light, and I'm going to eat a couple ounces of meat, and I want to kind of get back into it, because they're realizing there is some potential like betterment to it or whatever. And they're like, man, I've always just thought it was just killing animals and all that. Well, they start seeing regenerative stuff, and they start seeing that there is better ways of doing stuff, farming and stuff like that. And it's weird, because I don't think that conversation would have been had it not been so prevalent out there by Rogans and stuff like that. But guys like you, I mean, other guys that have a big channel and a big outlet that are telling people, hey man, we're not saying you have to go full carnivore, and you like, if you're gonna eat a salad every once in a while, you're whatever. We're saying, man, you should test the waters a little bit, try it out, man. It's organic, it's good, it doesn't whatever. And I feel like, I guess before this age of information, the internet age, you were either A or B. There was no middle ground, and I feel like that middle ground is coming together.
Well, the reality of human beings in general is 9 out of 10 people are relatively free thinking.
For sure.
But they align themselves with a given direction based off of things that are most important to them.
For sure.
But if you don't realize that a person that's opposed to you in your ideology is also a free thinking person. If you sit down and have a conversation, you're like 95% the same.
Exactly.
Why are we fighting each other? You know,
exactly.
it's funny how that works, and if more people can realize that, we can all have a similar path forward in a positive way.
Yeah.
And I can't thank Rogan enough, because he's really opened that door up more than anybody else by a long shot. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that have kind of opened the other side of the fence's mind to things. You know, Cameron Haynes is one of them. He gets people to look at that where they wouldn't have been looking at before through a different avenue, because he's so into his running and whatnot. That's a phenomenal thing. But and you've grown here so much to such an extent that I remember you telling me the story of you were trying to you'd made money, right, and you're wanting to reinvest in your merch because Rogan went and put your T-shirt on, which, for the record, Joe Rogan gets his archery stuff here.
Yeah.
If you're not aware of it, this is Rogan's shop. And he wore your shirt one day or something, and all your entire inventory of shirts were gone in like 2 hours or something like that.
Brutal, dude. The next morning, and I had no idea that we had worn a shirt on a podcast.
You're like, what is going on?
People really like that blue Archery Country shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, when you see the impact of guys like that, it's crazy, man. And it's funny because I'm just old enough to be before like social media and all that stuff.
We're the same age.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I'm right with you.
Yeah. So like, I've never done really social media, because to me, I was like, I don't have time for that, dude. I've got filter jobs.
Yep.
I've got a deer that needs to be mounted.
It's in the same place.
Goats in a trailer, whatever. I always had something going on. So to me, it was one of those deals where I had kind of not doubled down on that, and then my partners, Brendan and Alan, originally were like, dude, we got to get this turned on. And I was the idiot who was fighting it. I was the guy who was like, we got better, we can throw that at better stuff. Well, you start realizing when guys make posts and stuff like that, how much it's moving the needle, and you're like, all right, well, we can't argue with that. So that's when we hired a guy named Sloan Brown, who does with Turtle Box, and did a bunch with MKC, and he had a bunch of brands. He was a Yeti guy before all that. Mm-hmm. And Sloan kind of like brought us like a cool factor. And that was where like I had talked to like Josh Smith and some of these guys, Bill, like I told you, I hate to name drop and stuff like that, but these guys were guys that I was telling my woes of the business to, and they were throwing their 2 cents at it, trying to help me be better at it.
Sure.
And I'm a sponge, because I still at this age, like we were talking earlier, there's times I'm supposed to be like this retail giant and this really good guy at running retail and stuff. There's 100%. There was times
we're
a
not.
week ago doing inventory, and I'm like, why would we order that many? What are we doing? And I'm like, well, that's on me because I'm the one who does
Yeah.
it. Also, I'm an idiot. I don't know why we did that or why I doubled down on that or why I thought that would sell.
Right.
You're constantly learning. But if you learn from these guys who are staunch businessmen that know what they're doing and stuff like that, I'm an open book, dude. Write whatever you want in there, dude. I need all the help I can get because
Sure.
every time I think I halfway got it figured out, the world is constantly changing. I find out I don't know anything. So back to the social media stuff. Once we turned that on, man, it made a huge difference, man. We didn't even have to repost that much. It wasn't like I was showing only Joe wearing our shirts or something like that.
Yeah.
People would notice it and be like, oh, cool. They'd look us up and then they're buying something from us. Or they're coming in just saying, nah, I just heard about you and saw it and thought it was cool and came by. So it's crazy. Like I said, I'm still learning. I'm 45, 46 years old here and just still, I learn something new every day, man.
Yeah.
About the time I think I got it figured out, I realize I don't. But yeah, pretty wild. So
Well, and during that growth and that expansion, and you've seen it going up and up and up, you had we talked about this last night. You had a desire to try to take the profits that were left over and reinvest them into the business, and you talked to your previous investors.
So
and thought it was a good idea, right? And then comes around the end of the year.
Yep, we didn't end up doing it, and it kind of started this weird trend where we were like, "Hey, man, let's." I was like, let's try and go another level with some of this stuff. And it wasn't met by like restriction. Like I said, they're my best friends. They're good guys. They were just kind of like, I don't know. There's not a whole lot there to reinvest, as you know this. There's archery industry.
You don't make a lot.
It's not like you're sitting
really
there
don't.
looking at $500,000 and you're like, well, what do we do? Do we go polar bear hunting or do we? We were looking at our minuscule profits and saying, what's the next move with this? So long story short, we had kind of changed some stuff. We had dipped our toe in a little bit, but not gone fully in, which led to me being like, I want more of the pie. I want to try and grow this a little bit more and stuff like that. So that's a cool part of this podcast. I had kind of been looking at buying them out.
Yeah.
Personally, just me personally, I was trying to get an SBA loan, and just kind of like, I guess in essence, trying to figure out how the best route would be for me to take it on, because I knew even if I took it on, that doesn't change the profits and all that. It's still not a job where, you know this, you're not going to go to your bank vault and swim backwards like Scrooge McDuck and your money.
No.
Like I knew that, and so I was like, it's a risk. I mean, it could come a rainy day and I don't have the money. As to where before I could maybe call Alan and be like, hey dude, can you throw $50,000 in the account to get over this little storm? I'll pay you back, and shop will pay you back or whatever. And I knew I didn't have that cushion there, but I had finally gotten to a point where I was like, I'm going to make that jump. I want to do that. So
you want to dictate where the investment goes.
I just wanted to be,
right?
I wanted to be the whole deal. I wanted to be, man, that's it. And luckily my partners knew that, kind of saw that, and they were like, hey man, we'll help however we can. If you want to do this, we'll sell it to you. It didn't end bad. It didn't end anything. It just kind of was one of those deals where it just kind of naturally progressed to me trying to buy them out. In the interim, I had been talking to some of these guys that I trust business-wise and stuff like that.
Sure.
One of them being Josh Smith.
Yeah.
And Josh was like, we actually stayed together at a TAC event in Utah, and it was the weekend when all the internet went down. There was some company, it was actually an Austin-based company that screwed it all up, but the internet had gone down, and the airports were a disaster. It shut down like nationwide airports.
Yep.
So we were stuck in Salt Lake for a night. Josh already had plans to go eat with Evan or hang out with Evan. And he was like, come with me, man. We're just going to go grab a drink and hang out and whatever. So cool. I was talking to Evan Hafer, Black Rifle Coffee guy, and
Sure.
Evan was like, "Man, it's cool. I see what you're doing." He was like, I see you at TAC events. He's like, I know of Archery Country because of Rogan and because of all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, it's really cool, dude. He's like, I kind of believe in what you're doing. It's really cool. And he kind of was like, man, if something doesn't work out on this, let me know, man. He's like, I'd entertain loaning you the money or figuring some way out to help you out, get your partners bought out and all that stuff. To which I was like, man, that's crazy to have a guy like that kind of offer that, but
Right.
super cool. I was still on the path of the SBA at that point, or getting there, I guess. And so I was kind of like, I'd rather do it on my own and not be subjective, because I'd always heard the horror stories of owing other people money. You know,
It's not a good feeling.
you buy a new truck, and then they're like, oh, so you bought a new truck, but you just made your minimum payment this month or something.
Right.
So anyway, I was like, cool. I'll entertain that if I have to, or if we get that desperate, or if I can't figure something out.
Sure.
And I had some other guys here in Austin that I was kind of talking to that were like, man, I believe in you. I believe in the shop. If you need a little cash to, move on, whatever. They were like, we'll help how we can. So fast forward, Joe comes in to get a bow set up. Mm-hmm. He got the new Hoyt. We're setting it up for him. And Joe's a friend, man. Super cool guy. I'm not going to claim we're best friends or anything like that. Just a cool guy, man. Been really cool to me for a lot of years, man. And he doesn't have to. I know there's people that would bend over backwards to be his bow tech and send it to his house and do whatever.
Sure.
I realize that. Always been super good to me, dude. Always. So I'm telling Joe our plight here, and I'm like, yeah, man, I'm trying to buy him out. I'm trying to figure some of this stuff out. And Joe, this was kind of more recently than longer, but Joe for a while, for a couple years, had been telling me if there was ever a way to kind of fit in that he would like to buy in. But me and my partners had never really had that conversation, like a hard conversation on it. We had talked about it, and we had kind of thrown numbers around, but it wasn't ever a number I was like, he's going to bite on that or anything like that. So long story short, Joe was like, what you ought to do is get Evan to buy in on this deal and let me come in with Evan, and we could have some real fun trying to blow up an archery shop. And he kind of said it in passing, and then he just kind of left. Like, that was it. And he didn't the way I recall the story is Joe was basically like, I like what you have here. I like what you've built. I want to be a part of it somehow. I want to put roots down in Austin. It's a cool town. It's my town. I want to whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I remember going home that night and being like, man, Joe said I should talk to Evan and see if Evan would want to buy in. Well, originally we had never talked about Evan like buying in and being a partner. It was kind of one of those deals where it was like, I basically had told Evan my plight, and he was like, well, I'll lend you some money or whatever. It was never like let's next level this thing, let's do any of that stuff. So long story short, Joe had told me that. I had gone to my wife and I was like, all right, so hear me out on this, because you're about to slap me in the face. Open hand slap me in the face. Because I was like, what's bad is I was like, they're kind of wanting to come in as partners. And I was like, for the last 6 months,
you've been trying to get out
I've been
of partners.
basically saying, I don't want any partners. I want to just own this outright, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but this is different.
Those are hard people to say no to in that scenario, obviously.
It's a little different deal. So,
right.
That being said, Joe had already talked to Evan. Joe had preemptively called Evan and told him, dude, we should do this or whatever. So Evan calls me the next day and is like, man, dude, pretty wild. We're all fired up on this deal right now. So anyway, at the end of this last year of 2024, Evan ended up buying out my partners. And right now it's just Evan. Joe is in on it. And as weird as it sounds, Cam Haynes is going to be a part of it too. That's going to be news that's going to blow up the internet here. I don't even know what to think about that, but that's kind of the guys that I've now entered into a partnership with. As of right now, there's lawyers, and we're all just kind of working on stuff, making sure we know what we're doing moving forward. But and kind of addressing like roles and stuff like that. But then at the end of the day, Joe's bought in, Evan's bought in, Cam's buying in. We're going to try and make a big run at making this a even cooler shop than it already is. And on top of that, giving back to what's given to us a bunch, man. And by that, I mean, it's kind of what you're talking about with your shops and stuff. At some point, you just want to grow the archery industry.
Yes.
You're trying to make it better. You're trying to make more people get into it and like it and love it the way we do and stuff like that. And if these guys have any impact on that and can do that, that's all they're in it for. These guys already have money through other channels.
Right.
That they're not doing this because Rogan needs to pay his rent on his house down at the lake
No.
next month. They're doing it because it's
a
really a cool
it's
thing.
a passion
It's
project.
a passion play.
Yeah.
And it's something really cool that we're all really into and really, really cool. So it's kind of like, let's see what 2025 brings, but it's going to be a wild ride.
That's
kind of a wild ride.
Well, that's a pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible opportunity and experience for you, and I guarantee it'll be the wildest ride you ever had. Some of the stuff you mentioned that they're talking about doing is going to make such an impact that that I'm super excited to see where it goes and when you actually get your chance. So there's going to be a move in the future.
There will be.
And it won't be here anymore. So we'll have shown you some shots throughout this so you can see the existing shop. And when it gets all done, we'll make a run back down here and show you the where we were and where we are sort of thing.
Do it before and after.
Do it a little before and after. And, man, I can't say enough how much it's going to be an experience to come to. And
it will be.
It hopefully will get an immense amount of people that maybe are thinking about dipping their toe in to get a real experience and what it can really be like and create a space for everybody to experience archery in a really positive way and grow our sport. And I can't get behind that enough.
For sure.
I'm trying a similar thing myself, but obviously not with those names behind it for you. So hey, hats off to you. But it's just to be able to make it more approachable and get in the sport.
It is, and that's what we're trying to do. And honestly, it was the one thing that I had kind of talked to Evan about. I was talking to Evan this morning when y'all pulled up about this because I was like, "Do we want to start talking about this?" And Evan was like, "It's kind of out there already anyway, but it will become official here pretty quick." The reality is, like I said, we all want to make it better the sport and make it better and all that stuff. But I also don't want to leave kind of what brought us to the dance, which is the good customer service. When you walk in, we're friendly. We're not judgmental. We're not any of that stuff. We're going to help you whether you're setting up a $150 recurve or a $4,000 Garmin R9, RX9 or whatever. It's still the same service. So the goal would be, in talking, because I've had a couple meetings with these guys, is let's try and figure out how we keep that like small town, like keep the small counter feel and all that stuff, but still have a big shop. I mean, because they want to grow it. They want to have a bigger location, offer more stuff, be able to offer some cool stuff that I never really thought would be possible. But I mean,
it wouldn't be without that. Right, it wouldn't happen. Some of the stuff you talked about, I'm like, there's no way that pans out. But at the same time, it's like, if you're passionate about it and you want to create a bigger experience, maybe eventually it pans out in the long run. But I'm psyched that something like that is going to exist because nothing like that exists.
No, nothing does. You're right.
And that's pretty awesome.
And it'll be cool to grow. Well, it'll be cool to be a part of that growth and see it. Because for me, from the time I first bought it until now, I didn't think it was possible to do what we've already done.
Right.
Like in my mind, I was like, if I can make this thing make $100,000 more a year, and then you do that and you're like, oh wow, if I can make another $100,000 over this, I never thought we were going to get to that. And then you do that, and it almost feels like after 8 years of this, we bought it in 2016. It almost feels like now I'm like, the sky's the limit. I don't know what this thing's capable of, and I'm not even going to venture a guess because I didn't think we would be here. I didn't think I'd be talking to Joe Rogan and cool with Joe Rogan. I didn't think I'd be cool with Cam and Evan and know these guys that are legit businessmen that I can legit call up and be like, hey man, got a quick question for you. What would you do here? I don't know. That stuff I never dreamed possible, but we're doing it. So it's
Well, but it all of it has to go with your personality, the way you
sure.
grow through life, and the way you've approached these things. That you're a cool guy, like you
Sure.
seriously are. I've enjoyed spending the time with you and
Yeah.
getting to know you in the conversations.
absolutely.
You can tell you're a very authentic in what you are, and it couldn't happen to a better guy.
That's all you can be.
And I'm grateful for you. It's awesome,
Yeah.
man.
No, that's
So
awesome,
we'll see
man.
where it goes, and we'll come back to it and visit it again. But stay tuned for the future. It's going to be bright here in Austin.
We'll see what happens.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah.